will assist you. But it becomes extremely difficult to seek, to learn how to search out the correct information. You know, it becomes extremely difficult, especially for a lot of guys, you know, in there who have absolutely no education whatsoever. You know, I used to have to read people their mail a lot of days, you know, because so many didn't even know how to even read. So, you know, a situation like that, a lot of people get really lost.
I want to interject something or add on to what Jock just got from saying. The situation was so bad that people would not go to the law library, they would come to me. They would come to me and ask me the same questions or show me something that someone else has done on their case. But I didn't know anything about, I didn't have anything to measure it. All I did was I read stuff that had nothing to do with me. But I was looking for information about myself, but I remembered it. So I'd be talking to somebody and they could say something. I said, oh, that sounds like, you know, something about, you know, one of the landmark, mainly the landmark decisions were more popular, whether it was search and seizure, fruits of the poisonous tree, you know, all the basics, you know, right to attorney during interrogation. You may or may not have heard of what's called the third degree. The third, it seems like it's, you look back on it and say, oh, that wasn't like that. Like, you would be in an interrogation room and be a spotlight in your face. You don't see the people you're talking with because the room is dimly lit and the people are standing behind the light and the light is in your face so you can't see. Next thing you know, bam, you got hit somewhere. And they ask you, I'm gonna ask you again, what was this? What? So then you have people who will sign confessions. And sometimes they tell you you're gonna be interrogated and you see that light and it says it's for the third degree. It's your last time to talk, to tell us what happened. So there's some people who, when the word got around what the third degree was, you had some people who would confess or either give a false confession about what was supposed to happen. Just say what they want them to hear, and to avoid being beat or get hurt or injured. And that was a real situation. But the legal service organization, those attorneys, they would actually help me. They helped me do things, and it worked. And they would assist me in what I was doing. Now, going back to James Potts, Alvin Bornsteiner, which was the director of the Civil Liberties Union in New York, and he and the Civil Liberties Union there is the one who sponsored James Potts' book. And so I had started, I took the initiative among myself to write one. Mm-hmm. But I would write it in a way that of things that would happen to me.
So this was your first 7 years?
Yeah.
This took place?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You started writing your own?
Yes.
So at that time, did you consider yourself a jailhouse lawyer?
No. I did not know. I was just fighting because I had no other help. I was just fighting. Right. You know, when you didn't have any money, the public defender system is not what it still leaves much to be desired, but it was not the way it is now. Back then, they were not called public defenders. Court-appointed attorneys were called pauper attorneys. You know, a word for poor. You know, so they represented poor people. So you got and the pauper attorneys, they called hell. Even if your heart was in the right place and you wanted to do the right thing and to uphold the law and become an officer of the court and bring integrity to the profession. Even if they wanted to do that, they really couldn't do it because the system was not geared towards representing people to poor people, for them to receive a measure of justice in this country. It was not done that way. Plus, for me, getting involved in the law was a safe way to keep me from getting killed. Because I could still fight, I could still resist. If they say, stop resisting, well, I could still resist without being at risk of being killed. Because there was a lot of that going on. Yes, I was scared, but I used to watch the people around me, like Calhoun and Walther, those two. those two influenced me more than anybody, even to this day.
Other inmates?
Yeah. But they did not show the fear. And I was wondering why they ain't showing no fear. But I felt more comfortable around them. But when they was gone and got transferred, and there was nobody else, so there was a void. There was a void there. Over a period of time, some kind of way, I came into that void, and did not realize what people thought about me. I didn't know. It was something that you don't always. Sometimes fate has a way of putting you in a position that you end up becoming a champion of the people. And I can give you some examples, like
I really do want to ask you, because after 7 years, you got out, okay? And you acquired a lot of knowledge in the process about the legal system and about books and knowledge just in general, okay? So you got out with this knowledge, but you got incarcerated again. So when you got out this time, what led up to falling back into that trap?
Well, while on the inside, not only did I meet some Black Panther Party members, but I also met members of different other groups. And there was a competition between the various progressive groups.
To get the most recruits?
Yeah. And prisons was used as a recruiting ground. And it's also called the training ground for the revolutionaries. And this was the influence that was coming out of California, you know, with George Jackson and the Soledad brothers and stuff like that. So the prison was actually making us. The prison system was actually making us. So there was no other alternative but to fight, resist, or some kind of way you'd be killed. I know about people that was lynched. You talk about lynching. Last lynching took place in 1930, whatever. No, because I have yet to see any kind of documentation of some type about how many people was lynched in prison, even those who was hung under suspicious circumstances. Because I know some people who was hung, and we pretty sure they didn't kill themselves. You know, because the cells was made in such a way that you couldn't hang yourself if you was manacled or handcuffed or something. You couldn't. It was impossible. You couldn't get way up there. Unless you was tall, you could jump, and then you had to hold yourself and then tie it on there. Then maybe you could hang yourself, but the ceiling was so high you couldn't really get there. You know how you gonna hang yourself? But they found, you know, people hung in the cell. But he was in the hole because he was charged with committing battery on the guard. You know what I'm saying? So those things, a lot of that took place in prison, and you didn't have the media attention like it is now. Once the lawyers started coming into the prison system, and they started experiencing the same thing we was going through because they was friends of us, then they was being educated too about what was going on. You know, so they was angry, upset. When they go in the courtroom, they expressed it. And so things were being changed. When I first started doing time, you didn't get recreation when you went to lockup. When you was in general population, they let you go to the yard. You go to the yard, like the old James Cagney and Humphrey Bogart movies. That's how prison was when I first went to prison. But to clarify things a little bit, we want to talk about a Hollywood movie. The only movie I ever saw about prison that was close to the truth was Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption was the only movie to this day, to this very day, that I think is the best movie to give you more of an accurate depiction of what prison was like.
Especially at that time.
Yeah.
But okay, when you got out after that 7-year period, I'm trying to see your mind state because you learned so much, and then you were out, and then something else happened that led you back into the system. You know, you can just talk about, you know, your mindset at the time, how the events led up to you getting rearrested, and what was that time like for you?
it was not only the Black Panther Party, but they was the main influence on me. And at the time, before 1971, they did not know what was happening to them. It wasn't until some anti-war Vietnam War protesters had burglarized a FBI field office, and they went in to pour blood, animal blood, or paint on their records. But while they was there, somebody thought, let's go grab these. They ran out with them, and they got away. But when they started seeing what they had, that's when it was realized that the government was actually involved in a state policy of assassination, framing, and railroading of political activists. Matter of fact, the peace activists. Those were the ones who was targeted. And so that's how we learned about COINTELPRO. So those documents had started to be, and then what happened after that was...
an FBI office?
Yes, FBI. And signed by the special agents and the director, J. Edgar Hoover, approving it. And so then you had the Fred Hampton and Mark Clark assassination. And during the trial, young law students fresh out of college with no experience were the attorneys who represented those families. And we became friends later years. As Jeffrey Haas, Dennis Cunningham, and Flint Taylor. All of them are retired right now. Well, Flint's still active. But Jeffrey Haas, he's retired. Dennis Cunningham, he's retired. But they told the story. We talked about that when we went to Michael's. Michael Dortch, he was another one of the attorneys, but he was one of the attorneys who came in a little later. But that was a different story of how he became politicized. You know, they became politicized because of the police state policies. Not because it was happening to somebody else, but because it also happened to them. Just like Michael Dortch was hung out the window by U.S. Marshals, and he was before he became, you know, he mentioned the bar and gone from practicing law, he was a clerk for one of the judges in Chicago during the Chicago 7 trial. So he behind the scenes seeing all this going on. And then once he became an attorney, he started like represent people who need the most representation. So he represented some Puerto Ricans and Puerto Rican nationalists. And ended up, something happened in the court, and Michael was objecting and describing for the record, they are now doing this to my client. They took Michael out into the hallway and hang him out the window. Say, if you keep on doing, we'll drop, you know. So that made Michael even more determined. You know, then years later, Michael became my attorney. You know, but that is some of the things that was happening. So I'm gonna get you your question about the latest foundation. So when we was in prison, we was talking about, look, this nonviolent thing ain't gonna get it. Marching on a picket line not gonna get it. We're gonna have to do what George Jackson was saying we have to do. So we ended up, or should I say I ended up, joining the underground. And we had, remember the underground, you had different groups who was part of the underground. And we called ourselves the DLA. So when I was released, and then we had an oath, and we took a vow of poverty. The vow of poverty was a mistake, but that's what we did anyway. We made a lot of mistakes. But we took a vow of poverty. So we forego any raising a family. We gave up all possessions because we thought we would be killed or we would have a life or was a doomed. We said that a revolutionary was a doomed man or a doomed person. So we saw ourselves as being doomed, but we make the sacrifice for others. So those who was part of the underground could not do any above ground work. And those who were doing above ground work, they could not do any underground work. But the underground protected the above ground. Then you had other things that was going on, such as what happened between Huey Newton and L.G. Cleaver. They fell out. So you had two Black Panther Party chapters in the United States at one time. You had well, it really was three, but the one that was in Lowndes County, Alabama, did not go national. But Huey Newton took the symbol and some of the things they were doing in Lowndes County, because it was, that was in 1964, I think. The Lowndes County Black Panther Party was a a group of people who was registering people to vote, but they also defended themselves against the Klan and anybody